That is one good looking vehicle. And you know the funny thing? Trax already knows that. Hey everybody, it's Chris. Welcome to my Transformers collection. Today we're pulling out the nostalgia goodness of 1985's Trax. He is the blue Corvette Stingray, and man, he is a really cool vehicle mode. And if you know the character, you know that he would also agree. What you see in front of you here is my original sealed Trax from 1985. This is not a reissue or a knockoff or anything. This is my original sealed Trax that I bought way back in the 90s. In fact, this guy is almost case fresh, except he has a little ding here in the bottom left that has been there since I bought it. And there is Trax, sitting in his bubble for almost 30 years now without being touched. You can see the bubble is still sealed to the back of the card, and he looks great. We spin it around to the back. You have the typical 1985 action scene that you would always see on the back of these boxes. But one thing to point out in this case, since we're talking about Trax, if you look dead center here, you'll see Trax is there in this entire battle, but he's red. And that's because the Diaclone Trax, which is obviously where this figure comes from in Japan, originally was red. When they printed it on the back of the box, they kept him in his red colors. If we look at Trax's tech spec, his quote basically tells you exactly who he is. Looking good is what life is all about. And in the show, that's all he worried about was his looks. His function is warrior. Trax was always that guy that was worried about his looks. You know, Sunstreaker had that a little bit. He was always worried about his paint job and stuff. And Trax not only was worried about that, but he knew. He just had that attitude about him. He was real droll. And I remember the one episode where he made friends with Raul, when Raul was basically breaking up cars and trying to sell them as parts, and Raul and Trax kind of became buddies for those couple of episodes that they showed up together. And that was an interesting dynamic. And I remember Trax was damaged and his voice box was completely disabled, and so he was on the chopping block in the one episode. Funny enough, Masterpiece Trax actually comes with a little miniature Raul figure. But that's for another time. All right, let's take a closer look at the figure itself. We're going to use the Transformers Commemorative Series version because I don't want to crack open my sealed Generation 1. And you can see this is actually signed by Michael McConaughey. He was the voice of Trax and Cosmos, and he came to TFCon 2015. And it was really cool getting a chance to meet him, and you can see he signed the front of the box for me. I always really loved Trax's voice, and so I thought this was a perfect one. I love the artwork here on the front as well. It's definitely Trax. I picked this one up in 2003 at Toys R Us, and I really wanted to get this one signed instead of the original, and you can see Trax is just hanging on out in the plastic. As we've discussed in previous episodes, the Commemorative Series reissues were essentially the same figure as before in the 80s, with just a couple of minor differences, which I'll cover as we get to them. But here is everything you would have gotten out of a G1 Trax. Obviously on the right there you have the instructions and a label sheet. And of course you have the black beam gun, 2 launchers and a mount for those launchers, and 4 white missiles. And here is Trax in his blue Corvette Stingray mode. And he looks really great. I always thought that this particular alt mode was really, really nice. The blue is striking. You have a really, really beautiful decal with the flame in the front. I thought he was a little bit plain at times, though, when I was a kid. I remember thinking, he just seems kind of plain, like he could use a little more paint or something like that. But I gotta be honest, I've sort of warmed up to him over the years. But anyway, this is essentially Trax in his car mode. Rolls really nice, rubber tires. It's a really beautiful piece. If you put the 2 missile launchers onto the mount and push it down, you can have a armed up Trax. And you can see I also have the missiles in the 2 little holders. One difference in this version, which is actually very typical with these Commemorative Series editions, they removed the springs and the shooting mechanism from the actual launchers. So these missiles no longer launch out, they just stay in there. If you flip out the wings, you can also have an air attack mode, and that allows Trax to fly, which is a very typical thing that has happened with Trax over the years. And that's another reason why they want you to attach that, so you have kind of an air attack mode. It actually says in the manual, air attack mode. And here is Trax in robot mode. Now, unlike the vehicle mode that I thought was a little bit plain, the robot mode looks awesome. I love the paintwork on his head and his face, which is a really nice face sculpt. I love the sticker details that you put on the figure. It really adds a lot of color, and it breaks up some of the plainness, if that's even a word, in the vehicle mode. And I have to say, I really like the way Trax looks as a robot. In robot mode, you also see the beautiful chrome on the wheels right on his shoulders, which really looks nice. And you can see he has a really long rifle that takes up over twice the size of his arm. And there was a look at Generation 1 Trax from 1985. Hope you enjoyed this video. This is Chris, rolling out.